Let's get back to basics. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to get into masculine feminine energy basics. I have videos talking about masculine feminine energies here on my channel. It's been a while since I've done a video just really getting back to basics, and I kind of wanted to do a little bit of an update because I do feel like when I started making some of this content, masculine feminine energies were kind of a hot topic. They were kind of a trendy topic to talk about on social media. That's kind of shifted. And I also think that there's a lot of misinformation about what masculine feminine energies are. I still very much believe in masculine feminine energies. I think they're actually just a part of our nature. But unfortunately, like so many other things, the terms get misused, they get twisted around, and people start making them mean things that they don't mean and start using them to weaponize certain groups or start using it to make excuses for certain bad behavior or things like that, and it gets really convoluted. However, I do want to make this video to really clarify some things about masculine feminine energies and just kind of sum up the perspective I come from when I'm talking about these particular energies. So if you're new to my channel and this stuff is all new, welcome. Thank you for joining me. If you have been following me for a while, some of this stuff may be stuff you're like, yeah, I already know this stuff, but I think sometimes it's really good to have kind of like a back to basics refresher course in this stuff. So masculine feminine energies. These are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy. That's the one we're most ourselves in. Most men tend to be masculine at their core, and most women tend to be feminine at their core. There are exceptions, but that's generally the case. But it's really good for everybody to have a healthy connection to both their masculine and their feminine energies. If you don't like the term masculine and feminine because it makes you think too much of like performative masculinity or performative femininity, this is the yin and the yang. This is the Shakti and Shiva. This is basically the different ends of the polarities. I don't want you to think of it so much in terms of gender, although generally speaking, most women are going to be their best selves when they are in their feminine energy, and most men are going to be their best selves when they're in their masculine energy. Either of these energies can be wounded. Anyone, male or female, can have wounding in their masculine or their feminine energies. Wounded masculine energy, generally speaking, is what we would label as toxic masculinity. It tends to be outward abuse. It's control, it's manipulation. It can even be as subtle as like obsessive perfectionism or things like that, which really is like an obsessive need to control. It tends to be outwardly violent. Not violent in a sense of needing to protect, but violence in a sense of abuse. The way I describe it is like a man who has to physically defend his family or protect himself or his family in like self-defense. That's him enacting a healthy masculine energy of being a protector. If a man decides that he wants to, or somebody or anybody really, but in this case I'm talking about a man, decides to beat up somebody else because it makes him feel like more of a man and like more of a tough guy for his own ego, that's wounded masculine, or what we would call toxic masculinity. Two different things, right? One is out of a drive to protect, one is out of a drive of like just an ego need to try to humiliate someone to make themselves feel better. And this can happen in women as well. I actually really do think that like the mean girls phenomenon of like women gossiping about each other or trying to, oftentimes with women it's a little bit more verbal abuse than it is physical violence, but women who are trying to like tear other women down to make themselves feel better, that's a wounded masculine energy. That's wounded masculine, okay? Outward abuse, wounded masculine energy. Wounded feminine energy tends to be self-abuse. And again, this can be in men or women. It tends to be harming themselves or allowing themselves to be abused. I don't mean to sound like I'm blaming the victim, but it tends to be somebody who does not know how to set boundaries, does not know how to stand up for themselves. Oftentimes it comes from addiction, which addiction very often is self-harm. That can happen in men or women. In fact, I would actually argue that there's a lot of wounded masculine energy in women today, and there's a lot of wounded feminine energy in a lot of men today. So this is not a male-female thing. There's a lot of wounding going on in the world today. Now, a healthy masculine energy would be a protector, a provider, structure, discipline, focus, drive, passion, purpose. Those things are all very healthy masculine traits. And men and women having those traits is very healthy. However, most men are going to function at their best when they are in that healthy masculine energy. Healthy feminine energy is flow, movement, emotions, receptivity, creativity, sexuality, sensuality. It's the dark and the light. It is nature. It's death and rebirth. It's not about like pretty bows, and I know I'm wearing like a frilly dress and stuff, but like it's not about that stuff. It is about so much more. Again, movement, flow. It can be chaos. Feminine energy is very chaotic. This might be a controversial thing to say, but I actually think that a lot of women that get diagnosed with ADHD are actually just feminine core beings, and that's how they're meant to be. They're not meant to like focus. They're meant to be in flow. And I think a lot of women are being forced into having to be masculine and focused, and so we label any woman who's in her healthy feminine energy as being like ADHD. That might be controversial, I know, but I think that having a little bit of ADHD, so to speak, or the characteristics of that, is actually very natural feminine energy in a lot of women. But we really do suppress feminine energy in our society. Those are all healthy forms of feminine energy, right? And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need a masculine and a feminine energy in order to attract. It's like magnets, okay? We're talking about polarity. The masculine and the feminine opposites attract. Masculine repel, feminine repel. This goes for heterosexual and non-heterosexual relationships. You need to have a masculine and a feminine in order to have a sexual polarity. Like I said, everybody should have a connection to both energies. And there are gonna be times in the course of, say, a long-term relationship, you may not be sexually polarized. There might be times when it is absolutely appropriate for both partners to be in masculine energy, or times for both partners to both be in feminine energy, and that's just what has to happen. That's not the time when two people are gonna wanna rip each other's clothes off. But at the end of the day, no couple is probably gonna live their entire life in a relationship where they just wanna rip each other's clothes off. As long as both people in a relationship are able to kind of come back to their natural core energies, and their natural core energies are one masculine and one feminine, you'll be able to come back into sexual polarity. So I don't want people to live their life thinking that they always have to be in one energy to sexually polarize a partner. It's not about that. There are absolutely times in anyone's life when being in masculine energy is more appropriate or being in feminine energy is more appropriate. At the end of the day, it's just ideal if you live most of your life and you can actually spend most of your time, particularly in a relationship, in your natural core energy. There's been a lot of buzz on the internet, and I'm old, so I don't know who a lot of these sort of like young influencer people are. Jalen and Monet, I guess they're social media celebrities, I don't know. But Jalen, who is the male in the relationship, had a video that went viral where he was basically talking about like, why are men expected to be the providers, and in this day and age it's not realistic for a man to be a provider or whatever. It kind of got a lot of buzz going about like, well, why are men expected to be the providers and women aren't expected to be the providers or whatever, this whole thing. And a lot of people are saying that this is just patriarchy and whatever. Let me break this down for you. It's not just a patriarchal idea that the man is intended to protect and provide, and that the woman is intended to be receptive and creative. It's literally in our biology. And this is not based in a religious thing or anything. In fact, I actually think a lot of religions kind of end up, again, in more of a performative masculinity or femininity, which, you know, I think oftentimes we tend to mistake masculine and feminine energies with a performative masculinity. What kind of car a man drives, or, you know, any of those kind of like, you know, superficial things do not determine whether or not he's in his masculine energy. In the same way, you know, a woman could look very feminine but still embody her masculine energy. A lot of the trad wives, I have a video talking about the trad wives, a lot of trad wives not in very feminine energy, a lot of them are very masculine. A lot of that like 1950s housewife thing, which I love the 1950s housewife aesthetic, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them in sort of the micromanaging of their household are very masculine. Like, we really do have a very masculine minded society, and feminine energy is very suppressed. Men will constantly say women are too masculine and they want women to be more feminine. Most men have no idea what that even means. And at the end of the day, what the patriarchy does, when we talk about the patriarchy, it puts men and women in a very performative masculinity or femininity, which isn't true, deep masculine feminine energies. So when the topic of like, why are men expected to be providers comes up and people say, well, this is just patriarchy, or this is just, you know, some kind of social construct or something, it's literally in our biology. If you look at one of the most basic human things that men and women do, which is to procreate. It's literally in our biology that the masculine, first of all, he is the structure. I'm trying not to get demonetized on social media, so I'm trying to keep this as clean and give you like a sex education lesson as cleanly as possible. The masculine literally is the structure. He is the tree rooted in the ground. He has the thing to give. He provides, he penetrates. He is the giver in that situation. So the masculine gives, the feminine is the one who opens when she feels safe to and receives. It's in our biology, because when a woman feels safety, she opens. We know this because it's literally in our nervous system. As a woman, when you feel unsafe, you shut down. When a woman feels safe, she naturally opens. She's open and more receptive to what the masculine has to give. These are things that are innate in our, this isn't something that like society told us. This is literally in our biology. The masculine gives, the feminine receives. Once the feminine receives what the masculine has to give, she then creates something greater. She creates new life. And also, again, which obviously every time you have a sexual experience, you don't automatically create a new life, but it also, the sexual energy rejuvenates creativity. It's creative energy that's all tied together. But the feminine creates. She is creativity. She is the creation of new life, of creation of anything, really. The feminine creates. Feminine then has to release and surrender, because she has to literally birth new life, which again, birthing new life or birthing a new project, it's all part of creative energy, right? She birthed something new into the world by having to surrender and open. She then brings something new into the world, and her body literally nurtures. The body can literally feed the baby, can nurture the baby, whereas the masculine, because men are structured to have more physical strength, to have more focus and discipline, that's what they're supposed to have, and I'm going to get into why some men have it and some men don't. They are the hunters. They are the ones who go out for the kill, who feed the family, feed the mother so she can then nurture the baby. They also are, men are innately born with more upper body strength. They are the ones that have to protect the family so that the mother can relax and nurture the child. Again, that's the most basic biological function that we have. And it doesn't only apply to the creation of a family. Like, that is what our nature is. The feminine is creative energy. Whether she's creating a new life or whether she's, creating anything, it's creative energy, whereas the masculine is the structure, the protector, the provider, penetration. The feminine is the one who opens, who is receptive. It's innately in our biology for this to happen. The feminine is nature. The feminine is deeply tied to and connected to nature. Women are seasonal. If you think about the seasons, fall and winter is like death, and then spring is rebirth. The feminine body goes through cycles. We go through a monthly cycle where we bleed and shed, and then, we rejuvenate, and then we get, a new egg, and we, become fertile. And women are very seasonal, and we're very connected to nature. Nature initiates women into womanhood. Nature decides when a girl becomes a woman. Nature makes those decisions when a woman transitions at different points in her life. The feminine is nature. We are a part of nature. The masculine is man-made. The masculine, meaning men, boys, need to be initiated into their masculine energy. Boys are not born masculine. They need to be initiated into their masculine energy by masculine elders in the community. So men have to earn their masculine energy. Women, it's our birthright to have our feminine energy. So that's actually why, if you have people who are out of alignment, which most people in society today are out of alignment from their natural core energies. Most women are feeling like they have to be in their masculine energy, and most men are just sitting around in their feminine energy all the time. Hence the kind of men that are going to sit around and be like, why should I have to provide? Why should I have to protect? Why should I have to do this? Why can't I be taken care of? That's little boy energy. That's a man that has not been initiated into his masculine energy yet. Because we have such a serious lack of masculine role models in society that are actually initiating men into their masculine energy. And we know this. Like, we innately know this, and it's amazing how much we will argue about this. If you look at most, like, superhero movies, right? Like you look at most movies where you have a hero in the movie that men admire and look up to. Those men tend to embody things that we know are innately masculine. Most superheroes have discipline and structure and focus. They're willing to sacrifice themselves for the protection and provision of others. We know this. It's the villains in movies that are the ones that have like the greed, the selfishness, the ego, that kind of thing. Most heroes have to put their egos aside to fight for a greater good. Whereas most villains in movies, they have, you know, ego and flash and abuse and things. We know that those are negative traits because they're literally the villains in movies. But we have a society right now where there's a lot of little boys that are idolizing the villains and not idolizing the heroes in movies, unfortunately. But we innately know who the hero is in a movie and who the villain is in a movie. So we know what healthy masculine protectors are and what unhealthy wounded masculine or toxic masculinity is. Like we know those things inherently. I mean, we see it all the time in movies. One of my favorite film breakdowns that I ever did that I think represents this so well is the film 300. King Leonidas is the epitome of masculine energy. He is self-sacrificing. He will do anything to fight for the protection of his people. We know that. Whereas Xerxes, I'm sorry, Xerxes in that movie is Andrew Tate. Like, I don't know timeline wise if they made that movie about him or if Andrew Tate modeled his personality after Xerxes, but like once you see it, like go watch that movie, you can't unsee it. Like he literally is Andrew Tate. We have all of these terrible male role models that are basically operating from ego and are the villains. Like they are the super villains. They're teaching boys how to be super villains. I have a video talking about masculine leadership. Part of the problem, because we have such a lack of masculine leadership in our society, boys are not actually being initiated into their masculine energy. So they're staying in their feminine energy, or they're being led by really toxic masculine leaders who are teaching these boys to be very villains, essentially training boys to be super villains. And I realized that there are going to be a lot of boys out there, or man children, who are not going to like what I have to say about this. I don't say any of this to bash men. I want men to be in their healthy masculine energy. I want men to step into the best versions of themselves. But I realize that as a woman, a lot of guys are not going to listen to what I have to say. Any of you want to argue with me, I highly recommend you check out the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore. This book will explain this better than I ever could. And this is a man who will, it's actually two men, Douglas Gillette, I guess is how you say his name. They sum this up better than I can in much more masculine terms, in terms that I think a lot of men can understand. They also use a lot of movie references in here. This isn't sponsored by this, I just think this is a really amazing book. Reference stuff like Star Wars and things like that. So highly recommend that you look into this more. We innately know this. Like, as much as I think a lot of people want to argue about this, we innately know this because we know that men can be emasculated. Women can't be effeminated because our feminine energy is our birthright. It's within us. Whereas for men, their masculine energy has to be earned, and that's why we're able to take that away from them. The problem with a lot of these guys, you see it a lot with these podcast bros, and this Jalen, somebody was on social media talking about like, why do men have to be the providers? That's coming from boys who have not stepped into their masculine energy because they don't understand why they're here. They're completely lost. They're in their feminine energy, and you know what? If you want to be a man in your feminine energy and you want to find a partner in their masculine energy, by all means do that. But like, you also don't get the benefits of being in masculine energy as well. You don't get to be seen as a leader. You don't get to be seen as a protector and provider. You don't get the credit for it if you don't want to step up and do it. Unfortunately, we have several generations where we have not had healthy masculine leadership, which is kind of how we got to the situation that we're in now. I understand why there's a lot of women that are afraid of men stepping into their masculine energy, because a lot of women associate masculine energy with being dangerous. It's not when it's healthy masculine energy. It's not. In fact, men in healthy masculine energy are the safest men in the world. If a man makes you feel unsafe, he's probably not in healthy masculine energy. Here's the thing. Men and women don't live on an island. I know we love to say like, oh, you know, women want to do this 4B movement where they want to eliminate men from their life. And I'm all for women decentering men and not putting their whole focus and their whole self on trying to cater to men or trying to desperately be in a relationship. I think that's a really healthy thing. I've talked about it before. I'm a recovering pick-me girl, so like I'm all for women really learning themselves and tapping into themselves and not being so desperate for a relationship and not being desperate for male validation. And you know, there's men with the men go their own way movement, which I find kind of ridiculous, because when men say they want to like go their own way or whatever, that kind of thing, like they don't leave women alone. They basically just spend their time hating on women. And it's like, well, if you're still going to pay attention to women anyway, then what's the point, right? The reality of the situation is men and women are designed to live together. We're designed to mate and have lives together and stuff. So just eliminating men and women from each other's lives is not really practical, right? And whether you choose to date the opposite gender or you don't or whatever, totally up to you. However, men and women are gonna need to learn how to coexist on the planet, or else things just aren't gonna work, right? And the reality is, because masculine and feminine energies are sexually attracted to each other, if you have women that are more masculine, you're gonna have men that are gonna kind of be more feminine, because more feminine men are gonna be attracted to more masculine women, in the same way that men who are more in their masculine are gonna attract more feminine women. That's just the way that it works, because opposite energies are going to attract. Unfortunately, wounded masculine and wounded feminine also attract, which that's where you get into the abuser and the victim situation. And that's way too common nowadays. The reality is, the feminine needs masculine structure in order to be able to fully be in her feminine energy. And if men don't step into their masculine energy, women are never going to be able to fully relax into their feminine energy. That's just the way that nature works. So if men do not enact their healthy masculine energy, women have to be in their masculine energy. Healthy or unhealthy, however it comes out, women are going to have to be in their masculine. So if you as a man are complaining about women being too masculine, first of all, if a woman is masculine around you, you're probably not in your healthy masculine energy, and she's feeling like she has to protect herself. So if you as a man are finding that a lot of women are too masculine, you're probably not in your healthy masculine energy. You're either in very wounded masculine or you're in your feminine energy. And that's in an individual, but overall in society as men, if you have a society of men that are very feminine, you're gonna have a society of women that have to enact that masculine energy in order to protect themselves. What I'm getting at is, as much as I believe that men need to step into their masculine and women need to learn how to connect to their feminine energies, and I think both are important, if we're gonna talk about like who goes first, like it's almost like men and women are playing a game of chicken with each other, like well, I'll become more masculine when you become more feminine, and women are like, I'll become more feminine when you become more masculine, and we're kind of in this stalemate. The reality of this on a societal level is, men really need to step into their masculine energy before women are ever gonna feel fully comfortable stepping into their feminine energy. So if men are kind of holding this, well, I'll be more masculine when she becomes more feminine, doesn't really work that way. Because a woman is going to naturally relax into her feminine energy. I mean, obviously she's gonna have to work through probably some wounding and trauma around that, but she's not gonna be able to do that with a feminine male or with a man in wounded masculine energy. Men really have to learn to tap into their healthy masculine energy before they're gonna see women fully step into their feminine energy. And in reality, for all the men out there that are like, we want to be leaders, we want to lead, if you want to be the leader, you kind of have to go first. Like, that's just the way it works. When you have men that go on these podcasts that say things like, well, why do men have to be the providers? Why do men have to pay on dates? Why do I have to be the protectors? Why do I, like, you know, all those kind of things. In reality, these guys know that that's what they're supposed to be doing. They either don't want to do it or they have no clue how to do it. And they want to justify not doing it when they know that's really what they're supposed to do. And look, if you're a man and you don't want to do those things, nobody's forcing you. But don't get a feminine partner. That's the deal. If you as a man want to relax in your feminine energy, you want to get princess treatment, you want to be protected and provided for, and that's what you want, your choice, but you're going to end up in a relationship with a masculine woman or a masculine man. Like, you're going to attract a masculine partner because you as a man are saying you want to be in your feminine energy. Not wrong, but you don't get to be seen as a leader. You don't get to be seen as a protector and provider of your family if you're not going to protect and provide. I'm going to do a video about the like hypocrisy of the manosphere. I know that's been highly requested. The problem is I started to do some research to do that video, and there's so much that I feel like the video would be like 10 years long. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to approach that topic, but I want to point out a few things. Like, there's a lot of things in our society that are just basic biology that I think we're getting really far away from. And they talk about women's hypergamy. Now, I think hypergamy, I think it exists. I don't think hypergamy is quite what the manosphere is painting it out to be. And there's a lot of hypocrisy around that. Like, for example, if you as a man believe in pair bonding, so you believe that a woman gets emotionally attached to a man that she sleeps with, you can't also believe that that woman is gonna ditch that man the second she meets a man that makes a little bit more money, because you've already acknowledged that she emotionally attaches to a man. So it would be pretty difficult for her to just ditch him because some guy that had a few more resources came along. Like, that wouldn't make sense, right? However, there is something that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like, we talk about a lot about men's biology. Like, well, men have this desire to spread their seed, and we talk a lot about that biology. The idea that men are like always looking for fertile, even though they tend to be attracted to women that don't really have signs of fertility, let's be real, but that's a whole other topic. You know, that men feel this need to spread their seed, but of course, when women go through ovulation, they get horny. Their body's telling them they're ready to procreate. But if a woman starts sleeping around during her ovulation and stuff, we don't all of a sudden be like, well, that's just her biology, right? We call her a whore. But with men, it's like, well, it's their biology, but we completely ignore women's biology. But there is also something to the fact that, and we know this scientifically, that women tend to be more sexual when they feel safety. Like, that's just, it's a natural thing, because if you think about it, women tend to desire to be intimate when their bodies are telling them that, like, hey, it's time to have a baby, right? Whether they actually want to have a baby or whether they don't, right? And women's bodies are going to be more open to the possibility of having a baby biologically if they feel safety. It's one of the reasons why if a woman has health concerns, she tends to struggle with getting pregnant, is because the body is kind of signaling like, ooh, it's not safe right now. That doesn't mean that she can't get pregnant in an unsafe environment. She absolutely can, but the body's not going to be as receptive to pregnancy if it's in an unsafe environment. And in our current society right now, the way that the society is structured, let's be honest, money and safety are very, very closely tied together. So if a woman doesn't feel safe because finances are not good, her body is going to signal to her, hey, things are unsafe right now. And she's probably going to shut down a lot of her sexuality, because her body's not going to feel like it's safe to potentially expose her to a potential pregnancy. Because anytime a woman has sex, if she's fertile, there's a potential for pregnancy. Even if she's trying to avoid it, there is no birth control that is 100%, right? So like, anytime a woman is sexually active while she's in her fertile years, there is a risk of pregnancy. That's just the reality. Even if a woman does not want to get pregnant, her body is still wired to signal to her if it's safe or not safe to potentially get pregnant. A man providing, and a man being a good provider, is strongly tied to safety, to a woman's safety, because that's just our society. We tie money and resources to safety. So a woman is obviously going to be naturally more sexually receptive to someone who has more resources, because it's going to signal to her that things are more safe. That's just the reality of things. So again, I don't think that a man has to be a provider. If you don't want to be a provider, don't be a provider. But most women are not going to be drawn to a man who isn't going to be a provider, because that's what a feminine woman is going to desire from a masculine man. That's just basic biology. It's innate within us. This is not just a societal construct. This is innately in our biology for a woman to desire a provider. Now, I've talked before about the importance of women having very high standards, and I think that's very important. I absolutely do think that's important. I also want to point out the hypocrisy of men saying that women should choose better, but then when a woman raises her standards, the man's like, your standards are too high. It's like, well, a woman can't choose better and lower her standards at the same time. It doesn't work that way. I've talked about this in other videos before, but again, we're getting back to basics here. I don't believe a woman's standards can be too high. I think a woman's standards can be misdirected. And a very important life lesson that I had to learn, and I had to learn it in divorce court, so I want to impart this on you, is just because a man has the means to provide for you does not mean he has the desire to be a provider. That is an essential lesson. Now, if a man does not have the means to provide for you and he only has the desire, that's probably not going to work. I mean, unless you're really young and this man is showing signs that he actually is moving towards becoming a provider. Like, he's actively taking action in order to become a provider. And that's the only time that I would ever tell a woman that I think that she should possibly take the time to invest in a man, is if you guys are both young and he is actively taking the steps to become a provider. In that case, I wouldn't recommend necessarily like marrying him and starting a family with him at that point. I think you probably need to, you know, be in a financially stable position to take that step, is what I would recommend. However, if we're talking about grown adults here, for women, if you are looking for a man who's a provider, you have to make sure he has both the means and the desire to be a provider. You can't just have one or the other. And I think that's where a lot of women go astray, because you search for the man with the means to be a provider, but you don't pay attention to whether or not he has the desire to be a provider. Because there are a lot of men in the world today, a lot of them who are in very feminine energy, who think that even if they have the money and they have the means, that they want a woman to provide for them. Or they want a woman to just be on their own because they're not interested in being a provider. You know, I don't really believe in sitting around and trying to convince these men otherwise. I don't really think it's worth your time. At the end of the day, if you're looking for a provider man, these men are just not for you. There's also the argument that I hear a lot of men use, that they're like, well, you can complain about misogyny, but what about misandry, which apparently is the opposite of misogyny, which I find just so ironic, because it's like misandry, which would essentially be, I mean, I guess what you would kind of call sort of like the radical man-hating feminists. I don't think all feminists are like this. I'm not knocking feminism, but sort of your sort of modern day, like, let's just hate on all men are awful, like that kind of mentality. The worst thing that misandrists will do is tell women to avoid men. So men might get rejected more often, or men might end up lonely, like the single male loneliness epidemic. Like, it's the worst case scenario for men, right? In misogyny, the worst case scenario for women is that women will be killed and violently assaulted. The worst case scenario for misogyny is so much worse than misandry will ever be. Not saying either one is healthy, and I think anybody who's living in like a deep hatred of another group of people probably needs to work on that within themselves, and I think that's across the board. However, misogyny is a lot more dangerous to people's lives and well-being than misandry ever will be. It's like the whole argument when guys are like, why do I have to pay on dates? Why should I prove that I'm whatever? Like, for men, when they're going out on dates, the worst case scenario for most men is that a woman is going to use them for a free meal, and the guy isn't going to get laid and he might get rejected. That's worst case scenario for men. The worst case scenario for women is she won't survive the date. Like, she'll end up dead somewhere. Like, that's worst case scenario for women. Like, that's what women have to worry about when they go out on dates. Like, I don't think that men will ever fully understand the safety concerns that women have to go through just to go on a date with a man. Whereas for men, it's all like, oh, am I gonna get used? Am I gonna lose some money? Women are worried about losing their lives. And I'm not saying that that's common, for sure. I mean, maybe even statistically it's more common that men end up with a woman that's using them for a free meal. But at the end of the day, that's not really gonna alter your life all that much. Whereas it might be less common that a woman gets killed or SA'd or something on a date. It might be less common, but it's a hell of a lot scarier and a hell of a lot more life-threatening or life-changing than a man just simply getting rejected or having a woman use him for a free meal. I'm not saying a woman should be using a man for a free meal or anything, but like, let's be real, men have way less to worry about when it comes to dating than women do. You know, a lot of the stuff that I see when people are like, oh, it's just the patriarchy. I mean, there are absolutely, you know, just societal norms and societal stereotypes that are not rooted in biology. I mean, it's the fact that little boys wear blue and little girls wear pink. Like, that's that's societal construct, like that there's no innate biology in that. But that doesn't mean that there isn't innate biology in things like our energetics and things. Like, it doesn't mean that there isn't sort of a masculine, feminine, energetic polarity. Like, these things are actually like a part of us. And you know, there's a lot of people that want to say there's no scientific evidence to it. Well, there's actually plenty of scientific evidence. I've talked to a lot of people who study this stuff, like PhD psychologists, who have actually talked about how some of these things are absolutely backed up by science. Women's intuition, women having a higher intuition than men do, absolutely backed up by science. Because you see it in infant girls, you know, because as women, we need to have a heightened sense of intuition and a heightened sense of reading people in order to keep us safe, because women tend to be less physically able to protect ourselves. This stuff is all in our biology. This is all nature. We can't keep denying it. And I think I'm seeing a younger generation, especially because I think so many boys in our younger generations, even in my generation, to be honest with you, have not been taught how to be in their masculine energy, and they don't have role models, and they don't have masculine leaders who are actually initiating them into this. There was a video that was going around that was saying something like, I'm paraphrasing this, men are expected to be 10 times better than our grandfathers to get women who are 100 times worse than our grandmothers, which I find ironic. And I know a lot of guys saying this are maybe a little bit younger, but like, I'm looking at my grandparents and I'm like, I have never met a man from my generation or younger that could do the things that either of my grandfathers could do. But yet, I can do everything that my grandmothers did. Both of my grandmothers were amazing women that had a lot of skill and talent in life. But yet, I've never met a man that could do the things that my grandfathers could do. So like, when I look at guys who are like, oh, we're expected to be better than our grandfathers. Can you build a house? Have you gone off to war? If you have, then maybe we'll talk. But like, if you haven't, you can sit down and be quiet. Whereas guys are like, women who are 100 times worse than our grandmothers, I'm not gonna say there aren't some bad women in the world. I mean, there's bad men and bad women in the world, but at the end of the day, like, I know I can do everything that my grandmothers could do, but yet I don't know any guys that could do anything that my grandfathers could do. And I'm not saying that they don't exist, but they're certainly not common. I don't say any of this to like bash men or, you know, hate on men, because I really want to see men do better. I absolutely do, because I think it's just better for society. I know I've said this in other videos, but I think men being better and bettering themselves is not only good for them, it's good for women, it's good for children, it's good for the next generation. One of the things that really is bugging me now is that there's so much evidence out there that it's the healthiest situation for children, for the next generation, to have a two-parent household. And I would argue that a masculine parent and a feminine parent in a household is ideal. That's what the two-parent household is because then you have two parents that are able to fully embody their masculine and their feminine energies. Because when you have a single-parent household, you have one parent that has to embody both energies, and nobody can really embody both energies all the time and do it well. And most women, you mostly have single mother households. A single mother household, that woman is most likely going to have to embody her masculine energy the vast majority of the time. This also goes for married single women as well. If you have a husband who's basically, you're living as if you're a single parent because your husband is just another child, this goes for those situations as well. If you as a woman have to embody all the masculine energy in the household, the child is being deprived of a parent in feminine energy as well. When you have one parent who's required to do both, it's not as good for the children. And the studies across the board show this. The problem with the argument that a two-parent household is ideal is that argument always seems to shift to, let's scare or shame women into putting up with men just to keep men in the home, or putting up with men's bad behavior, or, you know, letting men be horrible fathers but keeping them around and overlooking things just so that there can be a second parent in the home. And we don't look at the quality of the parenting, because if you just make the argument that it needs to be a two-parent household, you overlook the fact that it should be a two-parent healthy household, that the parents should have a healthy relationship that is a good example for the child. So you kind of default to like, well, as long as there's two parents here, that'll be okay. And we don't look at the health of that relationship. We basically try to program women into just putting up with anything just to keep a man in the household, instead of encouraging men to be better husbands and fathers. Because at the end of the day, like, this is one of the most misleading things that the internet tells men, is that women just divorce men because they're bored. It's not true. it doesn't happen. I mean, maybe it does once in a while, but it's not common. Most women are divorcing men because they feel like married single mothers, because they have a man who's basically another child. And as a man, you are fully in control of the health of your relationship. Like, you can better yourself and make yourself into the kind of man that a woman is not going to want to divorce. And that needs to be the conversation. The conversation should not be scaring and shaming women into getting married and having families and staying married to somebody that's making their life miserable and putting up with anything just to keep the family together for the sake of the children. The conversation should be, let's make men into great husbands and fathers that women are going to naturally want to marry and have families with and stay married to, because they have a great man and father. And if you're a man out there who's saying, I was a great man and father and the woman just left me anyway, it's possible, it could happen, but it's not likely. It's probably that you were not as good a husband and father as you thought you were, because unfortunately many men today are not great judges of their own character. Like, were you going 50-50? Were you saying that, like, she was spending all my money? Like, were you referring to it as your money? Because if you refer to it as your money, she's probably gonna take half of it because you didn't appreciate the contribution that she was making. I'm going off on another tangent. The video's already getting really long, but I will also make a note about men being protectors and providers. Yes, as a man, you should be a protector and provider, and protecting and providing means more than just money. However, it should always start with money. Okay? Just because women are not looking for a man to only be a financial provider, they want you to provide emotional safety, being an active partner, they want you to provide other things. That doesn't mean that you should not also be a financial provider. Financially providing for your family is minimum. This might be very controversial, but I'm going to go so far as to say, if you were a man and you are not currently right now in this very moment financially able to and willing to provide for a woman and a child for the rest of their lives, you have no business sleeping with a woman. I don't care how ready and willing she is. I don't care if she says she's on birth control. I don't care anything, because none of that stuff is 100%. If you as a man are not right now in this moment financially able to and ready to provide for a woman and a future child 100%, I mean, provide for them so that they are safe and secure, keep it in your pants. You have zero business sleeping with a woman. Zero business if you are not fully ready to show up and provide financially for that woman and any child you create with that woman for the rest of their lives. Then don't even think about it. Dating should be the last thing on your mind. Work on yourself. Work on yourself. If you as a man, and this goes back to guys being like, why do men have to be the providers? Why do men have to pay on dates? If you're thinking that way, stop dating. You are not in a place to be dating. You have no business in the dating pool. You have no, work on yourself. You are not ready to date if that is the mindset you're in. If you're in the mindset that if you going on a date and paying for a meal is gonna break you for the week and you can't handle that payment, don't date. Work on yourself. Work in getting yourself into a situation where taking a woman out on a date and paying for a meal is not going to break you for the week. Work on that. Work on yourself, because you are not in a place to be dating. And I know there's going to be a lot of men like, well, why do women get to date? Well, if the argument that men have, which I don't buy this argument, but like, let's just say hypothetically that the men that use the argument that like women only have any value between the ages of 18 and 22, then at the end of the day, like, women should be allowed to date as much as possible because they have a smaller window. If you think as a man that you have a window that is forever, I don't buy this, but like, say you do, then at the end of the day, women should be dating more in that time period, because your argument is that that's the only time they have to find a man. Whereas if you have your whole life to find a woman, well, then get your life together before you show up for a date with a woman, because you have all the time in the world, right? That's the argument, that men get more valuable with time. By the manosphere's argument that women have this tiny little window of time where they have to find a man or else they're screwed because they're gonna hit a wall, then women have to date more in that time. Like, that's your argument, okay? Like, that has to be the logic here. And again, I know I have to do a whole video about the manosphere and their hypocrisies, but oh my god, there's just so many. So I might have to just sprinkle them into different videos here and there. I went off on so many tangents in this video. I was trying to keep this to the basics, but there was just so many things going on social media that was just getting me all riled up, and I really have to get off TikTok and just get some sleep sometimes. So Anyway, so I really appreciate anything, like any engagement on this channel. Share the videos, like the videos, subscribe, comment below. Any engagement on this channel really does help, and I really do appreciate it. If you have any thoughts on any of the random topics that I started going down on tangents in this video, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Any video suggestions, let me know. I'd love to hear your video suggestions. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up. Be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you as a woman would like to connect to your dark feminine energy, I have videos on here talking about that in more depth, but dark feminine energy is so healing for women. If you really want to work on your feminine energy, dark feminine energy is really great for that. I have the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal available on Amazon, details in the description box below, along with links to my courses and masterclasses, and all the links to my social media accounts. You can see some of my viral videos on TikTok if you want to check those out. Details are in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.